Hello and welcome to Talking of Business. Today we are going to talk about the leadership pipeline for a small business that has fewer than 10 to 25 employees. You don't quite have HR yet. How do we set this up? We'll use some examples here and we will discuss. Here's the show. All right, guys. My name is Jordan Disberger, the host of Talking of Business. And this is my father, co-host, Talking of Business, Russell Disberger. Hi, Dad.
Good day, Jordan.
Good day. Good day to you, Dad. I'm wearing my Jamaica hat today. This is one thing I was talking about discussing was I want to, it kind of looks like I'm in the corner here, but I'm in a giant room. You saw this room recently. And so I think I'm going to change up not only what the background looks like, but I'm also going to set a standard of of um, of the whole production. And so I'm going to start wearing button down shirts and make it more business and professional.
And not as casual and relaxed.
That's right. That's right. And so that's my plan, and that's what I'd like to shoot for moving forward. And so I'm going to orient things a little bit differently. And so those of you who watch visually, you can expect this and hold me to it. But then there's also a set of values and standards that I like to live by, and I want to kind of filter all of those things by whatever we do in this podcast or whatever I do in my life. And so that has part of the change coming there. So I just wanted to share that, and then. So we're doing a 3-part series now, and it's all on leadership pipelines. And so we're going to talk about how that varies for different businesses. We're going to use some examples of businesses, either fictional or vaguely stating businesses that we've worked with in the past, and using those as examples. And so we'll just roll right into that today. It's muted.
There it goes.
That's the transition noise. All right. So today is the small business leadership pipeline. So we'll define both of those things first. So a small business. So I said in the intro, you have fewer than 10 employees or fewer than 25. And then I characterize it as you don't have HR. I know some very large businesses that don't have HR that probably should have HR.
I mean, there are companies that I've worked with of 5,000 employees that don't have an HR department.
So I think the way your business is structured, can be different. Saying whether you have HR or not is not really a definition whether or not you're a small business. But talking to someone in HR, I asked them one time, how many employees do I need before I get HR? And they said, I think they said 16 to 25 is when you want to start considering that. So, but that's not the point today. That was just me reiterating and trying to explain why I said that in the intro, and then give the true definition of a small business, which you would define as having fewer than X employees, Dad, or would it be a revenue-based?
The SBA, I believe, defines it as under 5,000, or not 5,000, 1,000 employees. And some people that I work with would be under like 500 or 250. It's a loose definition, small meaning that typically you're still owned by a tight-knit group of individuals. And a lot of the local management is also, in part, the owners. And so that's kind of normally the behavior. And having an HR department or not can be helpful, but it also can be an unnecessary burden. It really depends on how you've organized and structured and delegated that responsibility. I've oftentimes recommended for companies to get HR, but that's when they clearly needed it. HR is not a profit generating entity, but it can sure in the heck save a company a lot of money. So it really depends on the issues that the company is going through if HR will pay for itself or not.
Absolutely. We can talk more about HR in a future podcast. So the other definition is what is a leadership pipeline, and we've talked about this previously in an old podcast, several old podcasts. But I don't want to just assume you know what that means. So the leadership pipeline is really you as an employee, you have a clear and defined path for you to climb up the ladder and grow in leadership roles within your company. Would you
Yeah,
say that is
I'm going to
accurate?
say that's a career pipeline for you. From a company standpoint, it is the continuation or a mechanism or system that develops its future leaders, which may or may not involve you. So every key critical leadership needs to be having someone else being developed or groomed to, in a sense, take over their role.
So
And
let's
sometimes it's a few individuals that will interview for that role. But if you're just held hostage by any employee, you're going to create chaos. And that's one reason why I recommend a lot of small businesses to grow, because it actually reduces a lot of risk. And people constantly say, well, I'm going to get this bigger headache. I got more people to manage. I said, if you set up your organization right and manage it correctly and have a leadership pipeline being developed or in place, I said, actually running a company with 100 and, 200, 300, 500 employees is not bad. It's actually a lot easier than probably running a company of 20 or 30 people.
let's clarify something that you said. You said this may not involve you. And so you're talking about the leadership pipeline there. So what I
Right.
was describing at first, the career path, the career pipeline, that's your steps that you see, okay, hey, I can progress here. Now, incorporated in there, you would have your leadership pipeline. So by you saying that may not involve you, that means not everyone's going through this leadership pipeline. Is
Right.
that correct?
So
So
typically, what you're trying to do is identify high potential employees that you want to, as a company, you want to invest in and start grooming them so that they have this competencies and the skills required to run the company. Just because you're the best at making widgets doesn't make you the best manager or the best leader. And so what you have to do is it's a new set of skills. And sometimes somebody that's pathetic at making widgets could be a phenomenal leader. And so these are the things that you have to be able to figure out is who's a potential high performing or a high potential employee that's worth investing in.
I know that you often will come in with PDP and you'll identify and you'll say, hey, this is someone who behaviorally could be a good leader, and then that followed with experience and then potentially an interview and how they actually treat people would define, hey, this is a good candidate to put into the leadership pipeline. Would you say that's an accurate way of identifying these individuals? And are there other ways that these businesses go about identifying these individuals?
Well, that's a good thing. Before you identify your high potential people, there's two other steps that you should do first. And let me kind of go through the traditional process, Jordan, and then I'll break down, start diving deeper. The first one is the company needs to assess its needs. We talked about HR. Do you need it? Do you not? Well, we have to identify the needs, the vision, the mission, where they're going, their strategy. We have to be able to identify high potential individuals. We need to then understand the competency framework that is required or needed to achieve the vision. Then we need to set up a training and development, a program. Some people call it the CEO University. Some people call it an emerging leaders. Whatever you call it, you need a training and development program. And then you need to provide exposure challenges to these individuals so that they can gain and grow more in responsibility. provide and have a culture of trust so that you can provide honest um, feedback without them taking it personally. Teach them how to network, because as a leader, you have to constantly be out and mixing with individuals. Then you plan the succession um, if and when that timeline might come. And then you monitor and adjust and then foster a culture of leadership. Because a lot of times you may have missed a high performing potential employee, and or someone else may surprise you. So if you have that culture, it's a lot easier to do some of these steps. So the very first thing that every business needs to have is a solid vision and mission. A mission is your purpose, why you exist. It should last like 100 years. Your vision is a 3 to 5 year target that you will be. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be motivational. So sometimes you can have an aspirational statement at the very beginning and then come back with quantifiable goals that relate to in 5 years will be X, so that people know what X is. So it's not this arbitrary statement. Then we have to take a look at our current structure, what's working, what's not, and look at how it's going to transition to be able to execute our vision. And so we're going to have a change. And so you want to develop an org chart roughly 3 to 5 years out, probably 3 years out. And then you need to look at all the external markets and factors that are impacting you. So that if we invest in talent, training, and development, you don't want to invest resources prematurely. You want to make sure that you understand the strategy and the things that might affect or, hey, thumb up, um, that might impact your overall or organization. So that's the first thing that you have to do, is that organizational assessment. The next thing you have to do is the role analysis, looking at the job descriptions and the future changes, the predictions, like I talked about. I like using a RACI matrix to assess things, even in a fairly large organization. And I'm about ready to do 2 of these next week remotely as I'm going to London. But a RACI is who's responsible, who needs to be informed, who needs to be consulted, and who has the authority to execute. If you set up every task that is necessary within an organization, in a sense, let's say from a lead generation to the conclusion of the follow up with the customer after they've done business or service with you, and then at the very top of the matrix, you list every key department or responsibility, and then you score it with an R, an I, a C, or an A to be able to do it. It allows you to sort by person. It helps you generate job descriptions relatively quickly. And it also allows you to understand if there's bottlenecks or constraints by seeing if there's too many people doing the same task. Is there ways to clarify? So it helps you establish kind of that future org chart as well. I know that was a lot in a
Yeah,
hurry.
there's a lot of structure and setup going into that, and there's a lot to unpack into each of those elements. And so you said the Rishi method, is that what you said?
RACI.
RACI method. So just to give them some credits here. How can I find that? Do I just
If
Google
you
that?
just
There's a
type
book.
in RACI in Google or Bing or whatever search engine that you're using, and type in RACI matrix, you will see a lot of them. It's commonly applied in project management, but I like to adapt it to more of an employee. There's a construction company on Monday that I'm going to sit down and we're going to revise their RACI model that we did a year ago, because they had their external factors around their businesses changed. They may be featured on a reality TV show. It's actually going to be their reality TV show. And so they're preparing for the structure and how it's going to impact their day to day business.
It's very interesting there. Just a couple things on that I thought were interesting. Um, when in conversation with people, I find it funny when they're like, "Yeah, I'm doing this," and that's fine. That's a good enough explanation on its own. But then they add something to it. You're like, "I'm going to be doing this remotely because I'm in London."
Well, because that's at the top of mind. That's a
I
major
I
issue.
understand. I just think it's funny. It's like someone being like, "I'm going to the bank because I'm a millionaire now." Just slide
Oh,
those
all right. Point
statements to me.
taken. Thank you. I appreciate that. Too much information.
Yeah. I just find that funny. The other thing, so I know that there's a lot to unpack there. I know you said, okay, before you identify these individuals for the leadership pipeline, these are the things that you should have done. I would say for most businesses and most people that you talk to, they probably already have a few ideal candidates that they're like, well, I was thinking this individual, I was thinking this individual. And so oftentimes they're putting the cart before the horse, and they're imagining, oh hey, these people are here. You're not saying that that's wrong. Those people can be there and we can vet them, but let's set up the other elements of the framework
Well,
first.
so what a lot of times people will choose individuals that have been there a long time or that are really good at their job. But again, as I said in the beginning of this podcast, is that doesn't make them going to be a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
So I time and time again I've had the, let's say, the owner's children take over, or I've had somebody that should by tenure take over, and the behavior style of the leadership. So let's say I'm a very dominant, extroverted, impatient driver, and I'm the CEO, and I've been grooming someone to take my place, but this person has the opposite behavior style on how they're leading. They're more perfectionistic, a little bit more mindful. They're going to be slower at making decisions. Well, the entire organization is set up behaviorally to respond quickly. Now, all of a sudden, you put somebody in that's a totally different perspective. They're going to stop that big flywheel that's been running in one direction. And because of the behavioral difference of that leader, they're going to actually start moving it the other direction. They're going to lose a lot of momentum, a lot of speed, and it may be critical for the company to change direction. But if it's wanting to maintain the direction, the behavioral style shift is going to be extremely costly. Great person has nothing to do with the person, but it does with how they're going to lead and impact. So it's not just skill, it's not tenure, it's not who's the best. But you have to think of the behavioral element. And majority of the reasons why people fail in their job is behavior. So it's one reason why, as a past venture capitalist, as a current consultant, executive coach, and someone that also helps recruit, I really look at a lot based on behavior because it's like pixie dust. It takes the people issue out of the takes it out of the way. It's no longer the obstacle. I know what I'm dealing with. Now the
Right.
question is, will it work within this organization? Sometimes it's the all you have. So then the question is, what do we need to do to make it work? Rather
Right.
than just having pixie dust thinking this person's going to work blindly, and then you go at home at night and you pray, and you hope that they wake up and or that they can do the job. I don't like taking that kind of risk. I like being a little bit more proactive.
Let's put a quick application here, just speak in layman's terms, and we can dive into more of the specifics of the framework and setting everything up. But let's talk a very small business. Let's talk like a coffee shop that is currently run mostly by the owner. There's a good example of one in my town here. You visited it. The owner's fairly involved still, has a general manager, but let's say their plan is, hey, I want to give the general manager more of a task. Let's talk application in terms of, all right, I want to completely hand this off to the GM so I can just be an owner and I can go work on other things and be fairly hands off. And then also, uh, I think a part of that application is this GM should that GM have that pipeline already set up that they went through to have the next GM being prepared? And would they feel threatened that, oh man, this person might take my job?
Well, let me ask you a question. If I have a GM in place and I don't have someone to take over, and let's say this GM quits, what's going to change for the owner?
Well, they're going to fill in and be the GM again.
That's right. Now, this owner's had this freedom, and what have they probably done with that freedom?
What would the owner do with their
Freedom.
freedom they would
If
earn?
they had a GM running, do you think they're going to sit idly by, or do you think they're going to start other businesses or do other activities or get engaged?
I mean, in this specific example, I think they would probably start other businesses or invest in growing other businesses.
That's right. And so typically entrepreneurs develop and grow other businesses. So if they have time, they want to scale and they want to do it again. The problem is that they are held hostage by the lack of a pipeline. And so you have to constantly be developing, even as a small business, a plan B in case that GM leaves. If it's a critical position within your org chart, you need to have a plan B in case that person turns. If not, you will be held hostage. Yesterday, I was in an interview and someone proposed, hey, I can come into this role for 90 days as a consultant. You can try it out. Well, the problem is that this is an executive director's role. And if this person comes in for 90 days and we set up the organization, they go out, meet everybody, and establish this new bond, and then they want to renegotiate their contract. Well, now this organization, because it's only 2 people big, has no one as a backup. And so this consultant now can hold the organization hostage to get a much higher wage, to do this, to do that, because it's dependent on them. Or they're going to take another, 2, 3, 4 months finding the replacement, which is also very costly. So what do you do? And this is what small businesses find. And that's the reason why they stick with substandard employees, because they don't have a pipeline. They are being held hostage. An owner should try to grow big enough that they can work on their business, not in their business. Like a hairstylist, you want to get them out from behind the chair cutting hair, and you want them to look at it as an operation and schedule and try to figure out, how can I set up, the second salon, the third salon, the fourth salon? How can I make this grow, and how can I develop that pipeline? Because that's when you start making a lot of money. When you only have one location, typically your exposure to economic impacts was much, much greater. If you can scale and you have your leadership pipeline in place, you're no longer worried about who's going to run it, because you have a number of people that you can transplant to the new store, the new location that takes over. So it is truly critical to have it to scale. A lot of times people like, oh, I got a new idea, I got a good business, and they try to duplicate. But one of the reasons why it's successful is that the owner's running it. Well,
Right.
they didn't do a good job coming up with their plan.
To add to your point, having your vision set up and expressing that to not only the customers or your clientele, but also to your employees, and saying, hey, this is our vision. Our vision is to scale, gives those people going through the leadership pipeline a whole lot more confidence, because they're not fighting over one bone. They're, oh, we're going to expand here. I can be a part of this. I can grow with this.
This goes back to your statement. Now they see that they might have a career path.
Right.
So it's
Right.
no longer just a job.
That's needed, especially in something like a cafe or a coffee shop or a restaurant, or even a gas station. These very small businesses where most people are making minimum wage or very low wage, and they may want that salary, and there may be only one person on the whole staff that can have a salary. That's all the business can support. And so if you want that role, you need to see, hey, there's actually a path here other than me trying to take this other person's position.
So if you want to make a lot of money in a small business, you have to learn to scale. The number one reason why people don't grow beyond themselves, what they can manage, is the lack of a good leadership pipeline. So it is truly one of the secret sauces that you have to be able to generate an enormous amount of money.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have on the show for today. I believe we will shoot an episode tomorrow, and we will shoot an episode Monday, and then likely, because my dad's going to London, just kidding.
Thank you, Jordan.
we won't. That's cool. I'm excited for you guys. We probably won't shoot another episode or together next week. I might try to get some in on my own. But thank you guys for listening. Again, we'll follow this up with 2 more parts. I'll ask more questions on medium-sized businesses after you've gotten a few of those locations going, and then larger businesses. So I'm in a very large business. I want to kind of dissect what that leadership pipeline looks like there. But thank you for listening to the show. Share this with a friend, someone who has a small business, or maybe a medium-sized business, or a large business, or working in any of these. That's everyone who has a job. Like, subscribe to our show. We're on YouTube, social media, and we will catch you guys next time.